And a very good morning, CIS 244 Systems Analysis / Project Management students. This is Eric Magidson, and I am your instructor for this course. Let's go ahead and dive right into Chapter 1, the nature of information technology projects. Now, as I do these lectures, I'm not going to just reiterate what's in the book. I'm going to give you more information, and I'm going to give you my professional experience in managing projects throughout my professional career prior to teaching, and even as I taught projects. And I'll give you some examples of those. So let's go ahead and start through. Now, learning objectives, what I would encourage you to do is pause here, okay, and look at the objectives. Start thinking about these objectives as we go through this material. Now, I also highly suggest that this is just like a lecture. If you were in class, hopefully you would be taking notes. When you take notes, you add more tactile functionality to your learning, and you tend to remember things differently. That's not my opinion, folks. That is science. The more senses we add to our learning, the more we remember. So if you notice down here, I would suggest that you pause and you look at these project management skills. What does a project manager need? Of course, right off the bat, leadership, communication, the ability to schedule. What this means is time management, folks, not just managing their own time, but managing the time of others, right? Risk management, cost management. We're going to talk about all these things. Negotiation, critical thinking, which is, a challenge today because we can get the answers on Google, okay? But the answers to projects, the answers to completion, the answers to people are not on Google. So go ahead, pause this, take a look. Let's jump into the material. So as we talk about, information technology, IT projects, let's remember that project management, first and foremost, are tools that we can use for projects that don't contain information technology at all. Okay, so let's talk about building a house. Without a project plan for building a house, without having the human resources, i.e. the human assets of plumbers, of electricians, having time management of we need to finish A before the electrician can come in and wire up the house. We need to do B before the plumber can come in. Before anything else happens, we have to clear the land and set it up for a foundation, right? So we'll be talking about a foundation. And in this first week, you're going to do some documentation, setting up a project charter, which is the foundation for a project, okay? So resources we talk about, time, money, of course. One thing to realize is that every single business is in fact in business to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to maximize the value of investments in the business. Meaning if it's a publicly traded company, to get that stock price up, to make money for their investors. If it's a privately held company or a sole proprietorship, the sole proprietor got into business to make money for themselves. It is about making money. Now, commonly I hear people say, well, if we're a nonprofit, we don't make money. But the fact is, nonprofits need to make money too. They need to be able to support the people that work for them. And the more money they make outside of their expenses, the more money they can spend on their nonprofit mission, whatever that may be. So if a nonprofit that's used to, having $500,000 to spend on their mission, say feeding the homeless, suddenly has $1 million, well, they can feed twice as many homeless. And so they need IT projects and project management as well. So organizations expect some sort of value in return. Now, return on investment is where we look at this. Most people think of that term as a tangible investment, which means money made, when in fact it could be expenses reduced. Okay, so let's keep in mind, it can be expenses reduced. Those are both tangible, or it could be an intangible return on investment. An intangible return on investment might be customer satisfaction. If customer satisfaction goes up, we're going to sell more. What does that come back to? It comes back to money. So even intangible can make money. My last example is going to be intangible that doesn't make money, and that might be healthcare, the HIPAA Act. Health Information Privacy Protection Act. Companies are having to integrate electronic medical records and billing and certain things that cost a lot of money. In the case of our hospital here, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars to integrate systems based on what HIPAA requires. So as we learn to use technology, we're having to do more with that and integrate security, integrate processes, integrate things to interoperate that may not actually provide any business value for us, but things that we have to do based on regulation. So what's the return on investment? We get to stay in business. We don't get to I'm going to pause for a second while I think about this. We don't get to have a choice whether we do it. In order to stay in business, we have to be in compliance with government agencies. An example is I used to work for an aviation company. We had to do a lot of things that the FAA required us to do that reduced our profit on airplanes. It's that simple. But we wanted to be in business of making airplanes. IT projects enable the integration of technology and new products, services, or processes that can change existing relationships, between the organization, between their customers, between suppliers. A great example of this would be when Walmart integrated their supply chain management system. Suddenly, all vendors needed to have ability to stop sending paper invoices and build their own systems to send invoices to Walmart electronically so that they could be processed. So there's an example of a return on an investment. In order to continue to do business with Walmart, you had to do business the way Walmart wanted you to do business. Okay, so I would ask you to reference. You notice I gave a reference down there to the PM Bach. You can just simply Google PM Bach. It's a great website. We're going to spend a lot of time on that website. I've got some projects for you to do out on that website in regards to project management. So it is considered one of the main resources for project management. So they define a project as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. So think about that. We're not just talking about projects for profitability. We're talking about projects for a result, customer satisfaction, increased. I just was reading a book talking about the fact that Jeff Bezos, really focused on that one-click purchase. And what his programming team kept coming back and telling him is there was no way to create a one-click purchase. And then they figured out if they looked at the business process, not the technology, but the business process, and how they could flip that business process on its head, then they were able to integrate technology to literally create a one-click purchase process. And that, of course, was something that as soon as they did it, everyone else had to figure out how to do that as well to be competitive. Okay, so that was a project with a result. Now, of course, we could go back and say that result resulted in a lot more purchases, right? You talk about that emotional purchase at the checkout stand. That's what it was. You put that stuff in the cart and it was just one click to have it be sent to your house. I'd go ahead and pause and read the rest of that, talking about, the development of software, improving business process, construction of buildings, bridges. Those are all projects. So although we're going to focus on information technology, let's not forget that projects have been done for a long time. And without projects, then tasks that we take on would fail. Okay. Even now in creating this new course, as I've stated, this is a brand new course. It's all new material. These are, temporary lectures that I'm putting out till I can create better lectures for you. But I need to get information out to you, and I've already missed my goal of timeline. That's not going to happen again, by the way. So there we are. Project management. Well, it's the person that manages it. What is project management? The application of knowledge, skills, tools, techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. And what this basically means is we have to have the right resources at the right time in the right place, just in time to complete the project. Okay. Sometimes, for example, when Apple first came out with the iPod, what was Jobs' requirement? That it fit in a pocket. The first prototype would not fit in a pocket. He got the prototype, and it is said that he took it, he threw it against the wall and said, make one that fits in my pocket. What was the barrier to the project? technology. Technology did not exist that would make components that small. They had to go back and increase their project to build technology that would allow them to build the product. So project portfolio, a collection of diverse projects managed collectively. A lot of people also refer to this as umbrella. The idea is that we look at projects being done throughout the organization and make sure that each project integrates with the next project so that we don't have silos of data, so that we don't have silos of functionality, and especially so that we don't have processes that have to be completed multiple times in different systems. Okay, so even though an example might be a physical project of remodeling, offices. Let's look at the impact. Even better, let's look at the impact of expanding the company's server room, for example, and what is the impact on business when we do that, and when can we do that, and what happens if something goes down and Monday it doesn't work. This was a simple project of expanding construction, but look at the impact it could have. Now, if suddenly we take that into information technology, we can end up with serious challenges of not knowing that the marketing department is doing a CRM solution when we're doing a customer management solution, when both should be done in the same system. And maybe one of the systems that's being used actually has the modules to do both. We, of course, should be thinking globally, and then within our business, within our organization. Program, collection of projects, within a project portfolio whose activities are coordinated, so that we want to actually create a project portfolio that hopefully is a single project, or at least is very clear that if there's multiple projects, there is no interoperability amongst those projects. So when we talk about project management, of course, 1940s, the first electronic computer, we worked into electronic data processing, into what was called the client, where all the processing was done on the PC. That's where we started putting computers on desks instead of computers in large rooms. Okay, so EDP was mainframe with dumb terminals. PC was smart clients, some of which connected to servers. Then we went to the network era, where we finally moved all the data back on servers and didn't process it. Well, we processed it in client-server applications where the server did some processing, but we had processing on the client. We did that. And now what we're going back to is sort of the dumb terminal, or the mainframe, where all the processing is being done on the server, right? And all that's being presented is I/O, input output, through browsers. Okay, so when we think about that, that term globalization, well, that came in, okay, the idea of globalization came in when we had networks, when the internet really became popular. So we had globalization, and now I've asked you to challenge and give me a definition of cloud era, the cloud era, and what that means in aspects. So I'm not going to give you much information. I want to see how creative you all come up with, and what does it mean if we're talking about globalization and then we went to the cloud era, what changed in globalization to bring us there, right? So that's enough for this first lecture. There'll be more. We'll start back here in the next section. Take care.